Welcome to the first Energy Committee meeting of 2022. We have 4 members present, and that's currently a quorum. We'd also like to welcome a member of the public, Cheryl McIntosh. Welcome, Cheryl. Your picture seems smaller than ours, and I'm not sure why.
I'm not really sure why either. Well, first off, thank you for the kind introduction. But I noticed that I think that's just the way it was set up, I think, on my Zoom. So it's a little bit strange. Maybe if I hit start video, I don't know if that works, but nope, it disappeared my picture. So. Oh, yes,
okay. Well, we're glad to have you in whatever size, Cheryl.
Thank you.
Welcome, Bob. Happy New Year. So we should get started on the agenda. And I think Cheryl, as a member of the public, probably would come in here, Sandy, right? Or Cheryl, would you rather come in on the update on town energy? Your preference?
I think whichever either or, whatever you're present. I know I'm probably more focused on the town energy side. So just where my interest level is, but I'm open to either or.
Okay. Well, that's only the third item on the agenda. So why don't you stay with us and we'll bring you in then.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, and the floor is yours, Madam Secretary, for approval of the outstanding minutes.
I incorporated the edits that you gave me and sent the minutes out again, and I haven't heard anything to indicate that there was a problem. So I have to believe that it's been accepted.
Okay, anybody have any additional feedback or emotion on the minutes? Remember that the chair can't make a motion.
I'll move to accept the minutes.
Thank you. Is there a second? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstentions? Okay, unanimously approved, Madam Secretary. Thank you for your hard work in 2021. Now we switch to update on town energy. And Amanda won't be with us. She emailed me today and I said, well, the main thing we want to know is whether those charging units are currently operational. And so I have a little email from her, but let's get an overall look at the town energy from an energy consultant, Cheryl, and let's hear your global view of it.
So thank you. So, and the reason, and it to kind of like backdrop a little bit as to why I was very interested in participating on your Zoom meeting today. And my apologies for not contributing sooner, simply because I know there's been a transition from, I know some of the administrative personnel last year on the town side. So I just kind of held off a little bit, but I wanted to reach back out and just to kind of give the Energy Committee a little bit of probably a little bit of a thumbnail of kind of what had transpired last year. And I was hoping Amanda would have been on the meeting. I know I didn't realize, her and I had emailed earlier today, in addition to a few other people that she brought into the loop as well.
Cheryl, I am sorry. That's my fault because Amanda emailed me and I said, well, the update that we need for our database is whether the vehicles are operating. So if you just send me a breakdown of that by email, you wouldn't even have to come to the meeting. So that is on me, Cheryl, but I didn't know that you were coming and that it would have been lovely to have you both.
Oh, no. And my apologies. I'm not actually involved with that piece. My participating today is something a bit unrelated to that.
Okay, so, I unapologize then. Okay.
No, I was more actually, and I can explain it away at the end if you prefer, kind of the premise of my attendance, if that would be helpful.
Nope. We can hear it right now as long as it is in the general area of town energy interest.
Sure, absolutely. You know what? I just realized because my camera's not on here. I apologize. Oops, see, it's a little bit bright in my room, so I apologize about that.
So it's Cheryl live.
It's live. So I know it's like, I was like, anyway. So in brief, and let me just, and bear with me because there's a little bit of a backdrop here. So in 2020, I had a few meetings with the former town administrator, Dan Knappich. And I had worked, Dan being familiar with energy projects from his past life, was interested in speaking with me because I work with Johnson Controls, and my job is working with cities and towns in K through 12 throughout Massachusetts. So I had met with him a few different times to help him determine whether or not the town of Yarmouth and schools, including Dennis Yarmouth schools, could be a potential candidate for an energy project. So the timing was such that we had met, COVID happened, of course, in the midst of this at our last meeting. So things got a little bit pushed out, but I had conversations with various folks in the administrative team, as well as with Sandy Cashin. And we had conducted a kind of a high level assessment from an energy standpoint for the town. And I had sent over actually today again to Amanda and a few other people that she had sent over documentation to, as well as to Sandy, explaining away what the energy opportunities were or are for the town. There is definitely a substantial opportunity from an energy saving standpoint. And of course, there were many conservation measures that could be addressed, that can be addressed, but not only just from a saving standpoint, but also aligning with trying to help the town meet your Climate 2050 initiatives. So, so at that time, Dan had left, and there was a little bit of a change of hierarchy, if you will, in the town. But I had not been able to really get any consensus or kind of re-engagement of the town since then. So kind of talking, emailing with Sandy and with Amanda, they thought it might be a good idea to discuss this with the Energy Committee, just to gauge if there's any appetite for the town and from your committee perspective, if there was any interest level in having us resurrect what we had done previously and to have more conversation about that.
Okay, and Cheryl, what kind of systems were you working on? HVAC or electrical or both? Or?
So no, so when we do a high level assessment, it's kind of an all encompassing, if you will. Mm-hmm. So to give you a little bit of perspective, what we do is that we come into, and forgive me, because Yarmouth was a little bit different because you already had Rise Engineering come in and do a full blown, a very good deep dive audit of your buildings. So Dan was able to share that level of data with me, and we were able to extract all of the walkthrough information and all of their notes. And we were able to do an assessment of the utility spend and come up with what we derived as kind of a summary energy audit, if you will. So in essence, looking, and I'm just kind of looking at the range of facility improvement measures that we looked at. We were looking at, and this is just kind of a thumbnail, but we were looking at your lighting, boilers, air handling units, controls, looking at weatherization or building envelope for all of your buildings, VFDs, et cetera. So there was kind of a smorgasbord, if you will, of various measures based on Rise's audits, but then we also kind of expounded on their audit by reviewing your utility bills, which determined that based on that analysis, the project size could be anywhere upwards towards almost a $7 million project, between $6 and $7 million, and that's not including utility rebates.
Okay, and so just so I get a sense of this, Cheryl, was Johnson Controls offering to be the consultant on this, or the consultant and the firm that would do all the work? I'm trying to get an idea.
And that's a great question. So essentially, we ultimately want to be the contractor for doing that type of project. But what we try to do ahead of time, because many cities and towns like yours and schools are trying to learn and understand about what energy performance contracting is. So part of what my job is that I meet with many cities and towns and trying to explain away what that is, what that looks like, and what that means. But in order for the town or city to really get a perspective of what is that, and what can it do, and what's the purpose, you need to determine if you even have an opportunity within your city and town to even do a project. So we did a cursory assessment along with the data that was provided to simply help the administration determine if you even had a project potential, in which obviously it turned out that you do. So to answer the question, so at the time, so if we were to play it out, let's say if Dan was still there, Dan's intention was to want to go down the road of procuring, and that would include the DOER, going through the procurement process and producing an RFQ for vendors like myself to come in and to bid on that type of a project for the town and schools.
Okay.
And I'm curious if everybody knows what energy performance contracting is, or have you heard of it before, or maybe have been familiar with it in another city, town, or school system?
Question, this is Bob Palmieri. Where does your work fit in with the green communities work that has been done, and our participation in the green communities program?
And that's a great question as well. So the work that we do, so if you have work within or grant monies you've gotten from green communities, I should say, that can be used in parallel to doing an energy project, or if you've already done work funded by green communities, then that would already have been completed. But the nice part is that with green communities, if you've done work with them, you obviously want to capture savings from that, but also you want to make sure you capture that in your climate goal benchmarking when you're reporting your climate goal benchmarking to the state. So if you've already, it depends if you've completed the work yet or not. If you haven't, you could potentially include that as part of the project, and we can help you do the work that you're looking to seek with the funding, or we can also work with you and try to apply for funding. So it depends on what stage or where you're at in the green communities process.
Okay.
Okay.
And that's another interesting part with energy performance contracting, and I'm just going to give you a little bit of a high level. Performance contracting is typically your vendors are energy services companies like myself. You've got your JCIs of the world, your Ameresco, Siemens, a lot of the big companies. And what we do is that we basically determine, as we already did previously, whether or not any city or town has the opportunity or the savings potential, if you will, to do a project. And what any good ESCO, as we call it, ESCO, an abbreviation for Energy Services Company, what our responsibility is to helping work with you through the stages of the procurement process to up until the point where you do procure. Then obviously the ESCOs have to step away because we are now bidders, but we help get you to that process. And then once you go through procurement and you select your ESCO, then our responsibility is to come in and do more of a deep dive of your properties to really come up with a solid number of savings potential that can be realized. And the important part that I stress to every city and town is that when you have an energy company come in and do this deep dive audit, we will come up with a number, and we have to contractually guarantee those numbers. And that's kind of the beauty of what we do for performance contracting. We have to guarantee your energy numbers, and we have to make sure that year over year that what we say it is has to actually happen, and we're on the hook for that. So the beauty for a city and town is that there isn't a situation where an energy company comes in and says, yeah, we're going to do all these great things. It sounds a little too good to be true. The actuality is, no, it's a great opportunity. Most cities and towns in Massachusetts have done this already. And we are legally responsible as a company to make sure that what we tell you, we have to hold true to legally and contractually. And we work with the town when we come up with what the savings potential is. We work with you and your staff and saying, hey, what are your capital infrastructure needs and your energy infrastructure needs? And what are your climate goals? And we work with you to make sure that we're aligning with whatever your vision is for the town and your schools. So if you said to me, hey, listen, we want better air quality in our schools, we would explore that and say, okay, how do we put in or install a better air quality system in your schools? Or how do we improve the building envelope in the schools or in the town buildings? Do you need better boilers, better air handling units? Whatever that wish list is, we take those energy savings and we try to match it up with what you're looking for. But at the same time, we also need to make sure we're aligning with what your climate goals are. So if you said to, hey, listen, we made a commitment that we want to be net zero by 2030 or 2035, part of our responsibility is we have to help you map out how are we going to get you there doing this type of energy project. So I have to say, not many energy services companies are doing that. We do that because we're a bit ahead of the curve on the net zero side of the house. And we're acutely aware that in Massachusetts, especially, you are tied to some benchmarking goals for the 2030, 40, 50 timeline. So our responsibility is to help you figure out what are all those things that you need to do that you have left to do in all of your properties to help get you to meet those goals. And that's like a really big deal with a lot of my mass customers. I use town of Chelmsford as an example. They've done a great deal of solar in a lot of their properties and their buildings. And part of our responsibility is helping them find those renewable nuggets, I call them, and helping them figure out, well, you've got solar opportunity there. Maybe you might have a biomass, though those aren't as popular, but you may have some, you could do some ground source heat pumps. I mean, there's a whole host of and now think about it too. You can do, so you have some fuel cells that you can use. We've got battery storage. I mean, there's a whole host of different things to look at. It's a lot for one committee probably to step back and say, wow, there's so much to look at and to think about. But that's what you hire a good energy company to help you do, is to help you figure out all of those ways and means of helping you meet those goals. So I apologize for my very long-winded story, but I wanted to give you the essence of what performance contracting is about, how your partnership with your energy company should look like. But at the end of the day, our goal as an energy company is to help the town achieve all of those capital goals and energy goals that you're trying to achieve.
I have two questions again. One is, how do you avoid conflicts of interest? And secondly, where's the pot of money that these projects would be financed?
So the first question about conflict of interest, can you be a little bit more specific as far as?
Well, you're on one side of the fence, and then you jump to the other side of the fence. You create the project, and then you become a bidder on the project. Doesn't that give you an unfair advantage against the other?
No, actually, and that's a great question too. So it does not, because like any other contractor that would come in to do a walkthrough or a bid. So to give you an example, like with Dan Knappich, he came in and he just basically said to us, we're interested in doing this. Can you give us a sense of whether or not there was an opportunity? So it was a free service. We just come in to help provide perspective and basically do what I'm doing now in giving you just information. It's just general information. And it's just to get to know who the people are, to better educate about what that is about. However, let's say if you played it out, and let's say the town administrator and the school superintendent say, yes, this is definitely something we want to do, and we are going to procure. What will happen is that the town will take on the responsibility crafting the RFQ document internally with your procurement, and then they would work with DOER, Department of Environmental Resources in Massachusetts, and then they would craft the document, and then they would begin procurement. Once that happens, then any and all contractors, whether it's me or anybody else that would be interested in bidding, would not be able to have any interaction from that point on. Prior to that, anyone can, and this happens quite often, most of the folks that work in energy companies like myself are always in contact with various folks in cities and towns to have conversations like this. So that's completely acceptable. There's no conflict of interest. What would be a conflict of interest is that if during the procurement phase, if people started reaching out and asking questions and having, those conversations during that period, that's the only time it would present a conflict.
Cheryl,
Okay.
I have but Bob, you still have one question to be answered there, right?
Yeah, where's
Yeah.
the public?
Sorry, I'll wait.
Okay, and I'm sorry, and that second question you had said relative, the
Where
bucket of
would
money.
the financing come from?
So essentially, there is financing involved in there. So how it would work is that, and I'll just kind of play out an example. So let's say that the town of Yarmouth has the opportunity to have, we say, okay, town of Yarmouth, we did our walkthrough and we think you've got $6 million in energy savings potentially. And keeping in mind, and this to be very clear, the money that you derive in energy savings, it's savings that we would, so let's say if it's just, I'm pulling random numbers. Let's say we can save you $200,000 a year. You monetize that $200,000 on an annual basis over a term of 20 years. That's very typical and very common in performance contracting. The idea is that you monetize over that period of time. And by the way, all of this is very much sanctioned by the state of Massachusetts and Department of Energy Resources in DCAM. This is a very much accepted, proven practice. So you would monetize that over a period of time. So you're basically borrowing against your savings. That's why the legal contractual component is key, because if we tell you we're going to give you this much in savings, we have to guarantee that so every city and town can meet its debt financing. So what happens is that we tell you what the savings will be. You would monetize that over 20 years. You would there are varied financing vehicles available, whether you want to go through a traditional tax exempt lease, if you wanted JCI to fund it. There's a whole host of different ones that people look at, but it's very common. And basically the savings are financed over that 20-year period. And when you monetize it over that period, you're getting that bucket of monies. So the $6 million in savings essentially is what would be monetized over the 20-year period. So the great news about that is that it's turnkey self-funded, and that is financed. There is no money that comes out of the town's pocket. It does not come out of the taxpayer's pocket. All of the savings have to be guaranteed by the energy company. So that way there is no repercussion or no downfall, if you will, from the town of having to ante up monies to pay for the shortfall of savings. That is on the obligation of the energy company.
Okay, Bob, does that answer your question?
It answers my question, but it raises a lot of others. But
no, and I'm kind of giving you a high level, and I apologize. It's a lot of information at once.
No, I'm just see the Yarmouth taxpayers. When you say that you're going to save them money, that means to them that they're going to pay less taxes. What you seem to be saying is that they're going to take those tax savings, those savings, and use them for something else rather than giving it back to the taxpayers.
Well, the way it would work, and think of it this way. So many cities and towns have a capital budget, right? They can be upwards into they could be hundreds to millions of dollars, depending on the size of the town or city. So you've got a capital plan that has a whole host of varied equipment and needs for the cities and the schools, right? Most often, not many cities and towns can always pay for those obligations on a year-over-year basis. Sometimes they get pushed out for many years because they simply don't have the capital means in their budget to pay for all of that. Either what will happen is they won't buy the new boiler they need, or they'll go to the taxpayers and say, you know what, we're raising the taxes another 2% because we need to pay for all these capital items. So what I'm saying is that when you do an energy project, you're using the energy savings to pay for all of those energy upgrades and to pay for the capital needs that are on that capital list. What I'm saying is that the taxpayers are not going to be paying for all those capital items. The savings are paying for the capital items. They're paying for the energy upgrades and for the capital items that sorely need to be addressed by the city, town, and schools. So that's what I'm saying, that those costs are defrayed by the savings so they don't get passed on to the taxpayers.
Do those savings pay for the smoke and mirrors as well?
It does sound like it's smoke and mirrors, but trust me, it's certainly not. It's a process that for the state of Massachusetts to have many statutes in place, especially through the Department of Energy Resources. It's a very common practice. Many cities and towns in Massachusetts have used performance contracting. I could give you a litany of different cities and towns that have done it and that are doing it multiple times over and over. So it's a very regulated legal process. So that way the towns, cities, and schools are very much protected.
Okay. There we are with that. My question for you, Cheryl, is have you done any energy services for towns on the Vineyard or on the Cape?
So no, we have not. And it's funny, there aren't very many that have ever been done up on the Cape that I'm aware of. I think maybe Mashpee, there was maybe one that was done a long time ago, but I'm not aware of one up in the Cape as of now. I know Town of Bourne recently procured. I think they're the only one that procured that is looking at doing a project, and that was fairly recent. I believe that's all that I'm aware of.
Town of Falmouth, I believe, has.
Falmouth.
And I thought Falmouth was Johnson Controls or Siemens.
I mean, it wouldn't be Johnson Controls. I'm not aware of that one. That would be nice if it was ours.
I thought it was originally that you were in the bid for this, because that one went through quite a while ago, because I was introduced to performance contracting probably 5 to 8 years ago through E&E, my HVAC company, as I had told you before when we had talked. And they were working with us on getting some of those things done, along with my energy management system. However, when I had a change of administration, everything fell in the hole and it didn't happen. I did get some of my things, but it went through Rise Engineering and some of the savings, and COVID was a big part of it. So that's how I was able to get my energy stuff.
Excellent.
Well, the reason I asked, Cheryl, was I'm not sure if you're used to working with the Cape Light Compact and Rise Engineering, but there's a special situation with the Cape Light Compact, to which all the towns on the Vineyard and the Cape belong. And that's that capital improvements for energy improvements that meet a certain level. There has been a custom of the first $400,000, without not counting the grants and stuff, the compact being willing to take that on. For more than 400,000, you'd have to have board approval for a specific project, because you don't want everything to go to one town. But I think towns down here have a special arrangement that gives them better benefits than the off-Cape towns do, because the Cape Light Compact, as a program administrator and the only nonprofit program administrator in energy efficiency, acts for Mass Save and administers a lot of the state energy efficiency money that comes through. And so they're in a position to do that for the towns without a middlewoman or middleman. And that's something that you should be aware of. So the things that RISE has done, those are in association with the Cape Light Compact. And I think you should assume that those were pretty thorough.
Yes. And interestingly, we factored that in when I did the assessment back when Dan was still in office. We did take all of that into account, because one of the I'd say perks of doing an energy project is that we want to partner with the utility programs such as Cape Light Compact, because any of the programs, rebates, grants, incentives that they offer, we fold them into the project. So that way you've got not just the energy savings from the measures on your site, but also any free monies or benefits you get in tandem are added to that project. It's almost like additional monies that are not included in the savings computation. It's like bonus monies that you get for doing all of the work in the project that meets the criteria that they're offering. So we highly encourage we always do regardless, we bring in the utilities to help us build the bundle bigger, so that way you can get any monies that you could that you would be eligible for through their program. So we encourage that.
Well, I'm not talking about the state programs. The Cape Light Compact, and when they approach municipalities, they obviously administer those and they're fine. Right. But I'm talking about an additional incentive. The Cape Light Compact is an organization that's composed of 21 municipalities and one county, Dukes County. And so what they do is essentially, in theory anyway, take equitable turns for capital improvements that involve energy and energy management. And that's on top of anything state. That's just a thing unique to this region.
Really?
So that, yeah, if they went, if say like the town of Yarmouth went a different route and didn't go through the Cape Light Compact, they could potentially be writing off $400,000 of essentially grant money.
Right, but keep in mind, what you're saying would be in addition to a project. You know what I'm saying? Because we work with Cape Light in similar type of programs when doing the project. So so it's not a one or the other. We would be using both. So if they capped out, if you said at 400,000, that could be part of the project in addition to other energy spend savings that we would realize, if that makes sense. So we would never preclude the Cape Light Compact incentives. Those would be in addition to. So any federal, state, or local incentives in addition to a Cape Light Compact, we would also include those and fold those into a project. We would examine all of those opportunities.
Joyce, could I suggest that we move on with the agenda? Because I assume that we're going to want to, investigate.
We have a lot of other things to do.
Like with the compact, and sort of get some independent advice about.
Most certainly, and I apologize. I don't mean to take up your time. I'm kind of going off there, but so I just leave you with this as to possibility of just opening the door to review the information that I sent to Amanda and to Sandy. I know Sandy has been part of those conversations. She's been such a wealth of knowledge from our conversations. So certainly, I'm sure, Sandy, you'd be kind enough to kind of fill in the blanks there. But I offer the opportunity that if you have any other questions or you want to learn more, I'm a great resource, whether you want to look at it or not. I certainly would be happy to be here for you. So I will leave it at that. And thank you again for your time.
Well, thank you, Cheryl. I think we had, I only discovered that you were coming today. And I think we thought it was going to be more focused on actually the town of Yarmouth and a bit less of a sales pitch. So,
and I apologize. I wasn't planning on talking about this per se. I was more wanting to just get feedback. So it kind of took a turn. So my apologies.
Okay, well, just be aware of the special arrangement with the compact whenever you're
Yes.
talking to any Cape Cod time, because I think you might find it more worth your while to work with towns off Cape and not on the vineyard.
Right.
Okay, but thank you for coming, Cheryl. Have
You've
a
been
good
so
week.
kind. You
And
too.
okay, thank you. Back to our meeting agenda here. The Cape Light Compact update is a complicated one. You probably sensed it would be from looking over the minutes of the last meeting. With the DPU proceedings, 2040 has proceeded and is now being appealed. That eliminates the CVEO. But we also have a ruling because they had to announce it by the end of January anyway, on 2021 126. The way they generate those numbers, 2020 gives you a 20 as the beginning of a date, and then like say for 20-40, that means it was the 40th proceeding opened in 2020. So with 21-126, we were the 126th proceeding. There's still a major fight about ratepayer impacts on the bill, and the compact's position in asserting what they want to do is that in fact they would be helping with those special incentives. The people who aren't currently getting as much benefit out of renewable energy and energy efficiency mill adders on their electric bill. So it does look like that's going to go to court. It doesn't seem like there's really much choice about that the compact can either give it up to or go to court. And I don't see any other way that that's going to happen. So in other words, the never-ending story continues. We have an appeal going on the ruling on 2040, and we're going to be appealing the 3-year energy efficiency ruling on the 3-year energy efficiency plan that we just started January 1st. Good times, huh? So if you don't have any questions about that, our next compact meeting is a week from tomorrow, 2 to 4:30. It's a Zoom meeting, and you're welcome to attend if you're interested in following more of this. So if no one has any questions, I'll move on to the Solarize Yarmouth Plus agenda. Okay. With the Solarize agenda, we have had a bit of an issue with expectations about when things will be installed. With the Solarize contract, remember that the vendor has a full year. The obligation is everything must be fully completed and done by the end of 1 year from the customer's sign-up date. So we have no one who's in that position yet, because the earliest sign-up dates were in April. And really, other than one, they were in May and then forward on. So although nobody is being let down in a way that would violate the contract, the communication stuff that we sort of thought we got solved at the October 9th meeting, the Pizza Meet the Installers 3.0, generated some more contact and communication up to a point. And the point was December 22nd, and then all communication sort of dropped off. Here's the situation. We had several people who were supposed to be installed beginning March 20th. It wasn't a completion of installation. It was a a full installation. That was very important for those people because of the tax benefits and their tax planning for 2020, that they would get the federal tax credit, that they would get the Massachusetts credit. But I did check on this just to make sure my understanding was correct. They do not qualify for that. I thought it was maybe when you paid for the system. So if you made your final payment, that you would be okay for this year, but nope, it has to be installed. It doesn't have to be hooked up with Eversource, but it does have to be installed. So we have several people for whom my battle with Christmas Vacation was to get the Solar Wolf people to indicate that the postponement wasn't to the next week, from December 20th to, the 27th or whatever, but that it was going to knock them out of the year. I did eventually, after one so vague as not to be really helpful email that Ted sent those people, I did get specific cancellations for people that were specific enough to give them the information they needed. But that was only after I contacted everyone on that install list from December 20th on, and discovered that the only installation completed from December 20th on was the one over on Turtle Cove Road, where they had already installed the racks. You remember that, Sandy, because you were in the same situation with that. So I did make it a point to make sure that everyone had several days to try to adjust tax strategy. But I think we're going to have to be really emphatic with Solar Wolf tomorrow, that they have to be clearer in their communication. Like, it's not enough to send something out and talk about installer teams and part of the office team suffering with COVID, and that it's not possible to replace teams at this point at the end of the year. I think they really have to be more specific. And I spent half an hour on the phone today with one of the customers who really is concerned because they have $16,000 worth of her money. It's clear to me that we're not dealing with a crooked operation, we're dealing with a flaky operation that just doesn't understand the expectation of a homeowner who maybe puts down on May 30th thousands of dollars, that they will be able to recoup some of that with the tax benefit for that year. So that's the main news on Solarize. If anyone who's not currently a volunteer for Solarize wants to come online for that, we're having a meeting at 10 tomorrow, the Zoom meeting. And I think that we'll really be pushing on that. And I'm also going to be talking to Lisa before then to let her know the situation with the week leading into Christmas and week leading into New Year's installs. So, any questions on the happy stuff? I'm just the bringer of bad news today. Okay. Well, I guess with that, then we move on. The next item on the agenda is the discussion of the draft of the Energy Committee section of the town annual report. I sent you a draft of that. What the draft covers is that essentially this was the year that Solarize ate the Energy Committee. But I had other small activities that I could put into paragraphs. So I attempted to frame that as if we were doing as much as we could other than Solarize. Bob has sent me some edits, at least one of which was a grammatical suggestion for clarity. But also, Bob, I noted that you would like the names of the volunteers included with the section on Solarize. And
well, you have some members, and those were 3 who are members of the Solarized Committee, but were latecomers. I mean, they weren't, I think, on the original volunteer list.
Okay, I'm certainly willing to put on the people who aren't on Energy Committee or haven't been on Energy Committee, as long as I have their permission to put them in the town report. So I can get that at our meeting tomorrow.
Okay, okay, I see what you were doing. You were only putting Energy Committee members.
Yeah,
that were,
because it was the Energy Committee report.
I
Yeah.
I didn't understand it that way. I just thought you were, it should be all committee.
That I was picking my favorites. I know.
No, that all the volunteers, whether on the committee or not,
Yeah.
should be listed.
One thing I thought about that is everybody here knows, and you're sick of hearing it, but I always thought we needed 19 to pull this program off without driving ourselves crazy. I mean, crazier. In a way, I didn't want to demonstrate how few volunteers there were, but we could.
Who's going to read this?
Whoever reads town reports.
I know you have a husband who does.
Well, I'm not sure, Bob, if he reads them or whether he just saves them every year to take up an entire shelf. We'll have to give him a quiz.
He's into book feet in his library, huh?
Yes. So, yeah. Have any of you thought of anything that I missed? Please tell me there was some big important thing we did during the pandemic that I missed.
Joyce, this is just a kind of a footnotey thing, but I did late afternoon send you one language fix.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
Not an important one, but just be in your inbox.
Okay, I'll watch out for that then. That's got to be there already. Okay, very note. Okay, well, seeing the vacuum of discussion items concerning that, why don't any of you who think of other things that we might add or that need to be spiffier or something, send them individually to me by email, because individual wouldn't be an open meeting law violation, and I'll incorporate them. Somebody say something? Oh, background noise, I guess. So our next item is brainstorming how best to encourage town deployment of renewable energy. You know, we're really talking here about the EVs and the zero design procurements that we had wanted to have town meeting articles on, and that had to be postponed because of pandemic time with meetings. But most recently, not just the pandemic reason, but because we haven't worked, partly because of the pandemic, with town staff to the depth that would be needed before we propose these. We have some background overtures out to some people who were opposed to the Electric Vehicle Act in terms of the long-term strategy. But in terms of the short-term strategy, does anybody have any suggestions on how best to encourage renewable deployment by the town? I'm even willing to do, you know, things like grab people from the utilities and have them come at an energy committee meeting, say, talk about their electric vehicle charger program and the benefits it has for municipalities and that level of thing, and invite town staff. I'm open to any ideas on this, because I think standing still is kind of losing ground.
I mean, my sense is that the town administrator had invited us to talk about the language of the bylaws and work with us on trying to get to an agreed text. And that I did send him, yes, that we wanted to do that, but I'd never pushed to get it scheduled. So it feels like it's still sort of in our court to try to just get a meeting with him to talk about it. I mean, on reflection, I'm inclined to defer to your advice to not refile the petitions tomorrow, because that's the petition deadline, and just try to work this out with him without that pressure.
I do think that's the way to go.
I trust your judgment on town politics. It's not my expertise.
Yes.
So, but is that right? That sort of it's that we should just see if we can get a meeting and talk about it and see how much of a problem we got.
Yeah, I think the town administrator is quite willing to work with us. I think we might want to seek his advice on how to work with individual department heads and what kind of information we could gather that would help, or I know we can't do the in-person lobbying stuff so well with the pandemic, but I think it's at the town department level that we may have an issue. So and not with all departments, but maybe a meeting with the town administrator, and then see if he's open to having some kind of a meeting Zoom, obviously, with town department heads. And we could, in advance of that, maybe find out what kind of concrete information would be useful to them. And I'm also pondering about whether we should have FinCom and the capital budget people maybe in the loop on this.
I think it probably starts with the administrator, right? Because he invited us to party. and was very appreciative when we backed off the first time when he asked for the delay. So I'm going to slightly edit the last draft, partly to make even clearer that specifically with respect to the police department, it's their call whether there's an electric vehicle that works or not. And if there's not, then they don't have to buy it. I mean, it's.
Let's show them some shiny hybrids.
Oh, right. But it's like the department's call. They don't think that there's a model that's functionally equivalent. They don't, they're not bound by the requirement. They may just have heard that there was a rule to buy electric vehicles and not seen it, the text, and not even know that there's an exemption.
I would say that your pros adequately address that situation in the draft bylaws. But again, who reads all the way through draft bylaws sometimes?
Right. So I, should I just do that? Like take the next, reach out to him by email and propose a meeting with you and him? Okay.
Now it would be Zoom, right? So he has Zoom equipment. I have Zoom equipment. I guess it's doable.
I wanted to ask your opinion. After we had talked about, other police departments using EV equipment, I did Google and I saw quite a few different towns, and I think some of them were even out of state, that had purchased EV equipment for the police department. I don't know if you feel it would be feasible to even reach out to some of those towns and ask them for input. or if that's just kind of too out of field for us to take on.
Well, I think that sounds like a really good idea, Marilyn.
I mean, to me, the worst they could do is say they don't have time to respond to us. But the article, I'm trying to remember, I didn't save it, but I'm sure I can find it again, that they found they were useful for certain aspects of the work they did, maybe not all of it.
Okay.
And, you know, I could try to go back and put a list together of towns that have bought into it and see, you know, if we just wrote them and said the town is considering it or looking for input. And if they responded, it would be helpful. If they ignore us, we'll get over it.
We'll get over it pretty fast.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, it seems to me we should talk to Bob Wertschafter, who's the chair of the Chatham Energy Committee, where they passed this bylaw last year, and the police department has some electric vehicles. So
one right on Cape, that would be great. And then the other good thing about that is that Jeff Colby lives in Chatham, so you know they have a check on the information that we give them.
So I actually haven't investigated to see if there are any other Cape towns that have where the police departments have gone electric yet, but I will try to get that information.
Can I move us back a step or two and get the timetable that we have to get these articles on the warrant? And because you said something about tomorrow.
Yeah, if we wanted, if we wanted to file petitions, fresh petitions, to put them on the warrant for the spring meeting, the deadline is tomorrow.
And we'd have to have them with 10 signatures, which isn't a problem. But I suggested to Barry that we might want to do some work with the town and bring them up the next time.
Is this a state law, or that requires a 4-month advance?
No, it's a town bylaw. The rule, okay. It's the earliest deadline on Cape Cod, because I had to find that out last, you know, when 2 years ago, whenever the climate emergency project was. But
4 months seems like an exceedingly long period for something like this. I would have thought something like a month.
It's fixed on the 5th day of January by town bylaw, and it's you know, the town can. Each town sets its own rules for when petitions have to be filed. The state law requires that you be allowed to file articles by petition, but the time frame is set by each town.
Perhaps some towns are more enthusiastic than others about petitioned articles.
It all sounds like a communist plot against residential participation in town government.
So anybody have any more thoughts about that? I mean, this is really something that any ideas would help on. If Sandy, if you have any, I know you run into a lot of these persuasion issues with the district when you recommend, you know, energy management systems and controllers, and, you know, if you have any ideas on how to approach, we'd be interested.
All of mine have been approached, and somehow miraculously money shows up. That's the best. COVID helped. Because money for all your air quality, HVAC, and that type of thing came through because of COVID. So I was given a Christmas present that I wasn't expecting.
That's
so
great.
Very, very nice. But COVID, the one thing that COVID has been good for is me, for the HVAC projects.
Oh, great. Well, I'm glad it was good for something. I have been at a loss to figure what it was good for. Okay. It was helpful to the buildings and to the facilities manager of Dennis Yarmouth Regional District. Okay. So, well, we can have this, we can continue this discussion another time. I mean, I was just very aware that Barry had been willing to make the big push on this, and I was concerned about doing it against adverse conditions, some of which could be mitigated.
Well, the thing with all of this, I think it is, just like when Cheryl said that she had hard time getting through to communicate to somebody. I think with the whole pandemic and everything being closed off, that it's difficult to communicate to people and to update them on different things. Maybe what we should do is bring Bob into our next meeting, do an invite and ask him if he can have conversation with us about these projects. And maybe that's a way of getting them included with our plan. But can we do that publicly on air and recording?
It's a conversation that it would be good to have. I suspect on air and recording presents its own difficulties. Speaking of projects in progress, we might want to think of having some energy committee people and Bob and maybe some other people from town hall who've been involved in the applying the green communities money, because those people are really involved and would have I think a good sense and maybe good motivation as to where the needs were.
Yeah, it feels like cornering him in a public meeting on the issue in which we're partly trying to understand where is the resistance happening inside the town departments. It would be harder to, for him to be candid about what's going on.
And certainly one could have a meeting about green communities and future renewables and stuff without having it a town committee and a town committee meeting and all that rubric, because certainly we had one. I'm trying to think, can't remember when this was, but it was about a month after Rich Bienvenu left, because Rich Bienvenu was already moved out of his office, but he was the one holding the meeting, and it was himself and Dan and myself, Steve Gavin, Karen, and you for the district, of course, and then Karen Green. And do you remember any of the other people? But it was a passel of people, under 10. But it was also a meeting with the Green Communities program officer, and certainly that seemed fine to do. Oh no, I'm sorry, I'm talking about a subsequent meeting. That meeting ages ago was a big thing about where things were. And it was videotaped so people can go after the fact and see where things were back then. But I'm also confusing that with a meeting since then, which was in the fall, which was with Green Communities staff officer, which involved getting to know that the projects couldn't be changed and that Yarmouth would have to wait until the spring of 2022 when it fulfilled the original projects, which of course the previous administration had been deeply involved in. And I think a ball got dropped and maybe the priorities and what was supposed to be top of the pile didn't get communicated. So, but I mean, in other words, there are easily meetings about energy that don't have to be with town staff members and stuff, that don't have to be an energy committee public meeting.
I'm wondering what has happened with the police department and their HVAC upgrades. I haven't heard anything more on that.
So you mean the same magical fairy didn't drop hundreds of thousands of dollars for improved HVAC on them because of COVID? You have unique access to this fairy?
This was before I got my fairy gift. but they had already done a procurement to do all the HVAC on the police department. We heard it when we were at one of the meetings, waiting for either the building committee or something. And they were doing a big upgrade in the police department.
I hope they get that to work, because it's just awful that one of the newer town buildings has not been able to get its HVAC working well and efficiently, because it's from all different contractors and all different types of equipment. I mean, that is an energy scandal.
And sometimes
if you are given a lemon, you can't even make lemonade out of it.
But the other thing is that you put a system in there and you don't have anybody to be able to control it. So if you leave that to the police department to do the energy controlling, you need to have somebody that runs the energy management system, is able to set up all your set points, all your dampers, everything working. And without somebody controlling that piece of it, none of the other pieces are working.
Yeah, I'm sure that's how things with the original, once the building was finished and already had 3 different kinds of equipment in it, I'm sure that's how they didn't originally catch it as fast as they might have. Yeah. Well, we also potentially have a chance to work on something positive for the police department. They now have that strange practice training structure that's for canine units out behind the police department. Think of like a fire department having a tower that people can spray hoses into and jump out of. It's sort of that kind of a indoor-outdoor kind of building. But it seems to me that we could perhaps try to get solar onto that and try to get some things as a kind of experimental thing there that might be possible for people to see how well they worked. Like, say if we had some solar and then we had an additional, an initial battery there, and then kind of get an EV charger, you know, from Eversource, although it costs money, town money, to install them after a certain point. It seems like a chance to work on something that might help make our case for renewables. Nobody else wants to say anything on that, or at least for a minute. Let me just give you Amanda's report on our EV charging. The 2 charging units for EVs at the DPW building are up and running. At Town Hall, where there are 4 units total, 2 are operational and are going to stay the older style without the Wi-Fi connectivity. 2 were faulty, and one of those has been replaced. It was covered under warranty, but the material, the equipment was covered, not the cost to install. So it's been upgraded to the newer style, and this is operational. And the second one is going to be upgraded to the newer style, and they'll have to find some money to do the installation cost on that. Bayberry Golf Course, I know those of us who keep an eye on Bayberry will be glad to know 2 charging units up and running. Amanda needs to confirm that the Wi-Fi connectivity is working. Senior Center, 2 charging units up and running. Same thing. Amanda would want to confirm that the Wi-Fi connectivity for monitoring is working. But in some ways that affects a potential EV user less than it affects the town for wanting to get the energy efficiency data. And then the DPW, which I've already mentioned, are up and running.
Is there any way to find out who is using these?
Monitoring system could give us that if they get the connectivity stuff going. You know, because then potentially people would, like from the town, put in a number, we'd see what department. Given that they have to be free for the first 2 years of their installation, they have to be free to members of the public. That poses an interesting question that hadn't occurred to me. Do they have to be free to the public for the first 2 years that they're standing there as little charging pillars? Or do they have to be free to the public for 2 years, starting from when they're actively connected and or actively connected plus the internet connectivity? And I don't know what the weeds are on that, but I mean, certainly whoever made the rule about at first they have to be available to the public, as well as, of course, town employees for 2 years. I don't know that they thought that deeply into potential dysfunction.
Yeah, I mean, it's totally bizarre to me. I mean, I understand now. I just realized that one of the reasons why they're in the place that they are in is that is also the corner of the senior center a parking lot, which can be used as overflow parking for Townhouse Park. But do people who go to Townhouse Park even know that this thing exists? I mean, it seems like it's a fairly useless installation if nobody knows it's there.
I suspect that anybody going there who has an EV kind of registers these things on the horizon if they use the parking lot. But it does suggest that it might be good to have a public campaign once they're all functioning.
Yes.
To not just like to have them on the EV charging map, but have a public campaign that could make people feel really good that these were there, and have people who don't yet own electric vehicles see that it wouldn't be that hard to find a place in any of the villages of Yarmouth to charge their car.
How long does it take, Barry, to charge a car?
Different levels of charger.
So if you have so the 3 levels of chargers, you can charge it at a household 110 volt ordinary plug. It would take about 24 hours. You can have a level 2, which is 240 volts, which can be hooked up in the household. Like anybody who's going to buy an EV is likely to buy one of those 240 volt chargers, and that'll charge in 7 or 8 hours, depending on the car and the charger. So basically you can charge overnight. The level 3 chargers, which are direct current and so-called fast chargers, can charge in about an hour. But the only one I know of in the vicinity is the EVgo chargers in Cape Cod Mall in front of Dick's.
The reason that I asked that is some of these locations would seem so remote that they would have to like almost drop the car off and leave it there and come back, the next day or whatever.
Ride their bicycle home.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really checked them out because I assume they're level 2, so they're no faster than the one in my garage. And
right.
I'd have to get a ride home from dropping the car off. I've done that sort of thing a couple of times when I was traveling. Use a local level 2, but they also are invisible because if you can go on Google Maps and put in EV charger, it'll show you all of the charging stations in the area. The Yarmouth town stations don't show up. They're not known to.
Joyce and I mentioned that to Robbie, and she said that they would have to check to make sure they were functional before they were put on the map. Mm-hmm. And I think she also asked Amanda, and Amanda didn't know whether it was up to the state to initiate that listing or the town. And I forgot to ask Amanda last time we had a meeting and she was with us.
And again, my fault, because I told her if she just sent the EV charging stuff, she didn't have to come today. Sorry, Marilyn.
No, well, you know, I just felt badly that we brought it up and was starting to make inquiries, and then I didn't follow through to find out what the answers were.
And we only have 3 years to get 1,000 EVs on the road in Yarmouth, according to Mike's plan.
I don't know where we're going to get them, but we can work at it.
Well, isn't that town-wide private, not just the town?
I still think we maybe.
No,
it's everybody.
Everybody.
Yes.
Yeah.
But if people don't, see the availability of charging stations, they're going to think less about it, even though you can do like Barry has done, and set up a perfectly functional charger in the house, which is what I assume most people will do, but I'm not sure a lot of people know about that.
Yeah.
But in fact, like the data says that 98% of all EV charging is done at home.
Yeah, okay.
Nobody charges away from home.
Yeah, okay.
So the public chargers, are mostly theater in terms of practical needs, except if you're driving, if you're doing a long distance road trip, you would want to be able to charge on the road, but that's mostly about highway chargers.
Right. And I think that some of the more expensive hotels would have some as a part of the attraction to have people come for their vacation. That it would be worth. Yeah.
I mean, there was a Dave and I went up to the White Mountains for a few days over New Year's, and we're staying at this little cottage on a resort in Thornton, and there was the guy at the next cottage was in a Tesla and was charging at the resort.
Yeah.
I think the best reason, aside from town facilities and commercial convenience for customers and stuff, is that the more people see of these, the more they assume they're part of the universe, the more likely they are to buy an electric car. But I still don't know we'll get 1,000.
There's this great campaign going on now by Electrify America, which is one of the 3 big charging companies that I keep seeing on one of the websites that I rely on. I think it's the New York Times website. And it's this series of just simple graphics, normal now. And so the whole punchline of the campaign is that EVs have become normal. And I guess their research tells them that the real problem is people think that EVs are for somebody weird, and they're exotic, mean that you're weird and trying to
not weird, Rich.
But I heard this morning that Tesla made 300,000 vehicles this year.
All they need to do is send us 1,000 free and we meet our goal.
No, I think it was 300,000 in the last quarter. They sold like 800,000 for the year.
Oh, really?
Wow. Okay, well, anything else on the EV notion? Just a thing to think about for the future. I don't know that this is a technology that has evolved much, but it occurs to me that as we're pushing bike paths and things like that, electrical bicycle chargers might be interesting to have along the bike path. But we don't have a set goal for that, and we have a set goal for the electric vehicles. So I think we have to work on what we have set ourselves as business.
That's a senior issue. I think there are a lot of seniors who are on those electric help help power your bicycle things. I have my college roommate who's who's a great cyclist. In the last, beginning about 10 years ago, he got one of these kinds of bicycles so he could keep up with the young fellers. This is out in Colorado where there's a lot of up and down. And it's helped him on the up part quite well.
Okay, so we'll continue to wonder and come up with ideas and strategies for how best to encourage town renewables. And Barry, how about if you get back to us at the next meeting, if the meeting you're proposing to Bob Rittenauer doesn't happen by then, but you could at least let us know where it stands. But figure I'd be glad to.
I'm assuming that you would be in that meeting with me.
Glad to.
Yeah. that was my concept of it.
Oh, well, thank you.
So you'll know.
Do you want me to ask him for it?
Well, since I was going to send a new text of the proposal to him, partly to justify reigniting the conversation. Why don't I do that tomorrow, and then if you want to follow up with him to directly ask for the meeting, because I gather you sometimes see him or something.
With the pandemic, I'm not seeing much of anybody, but yes, I'm in touch with Town Hall from time to time, yes. Okay, let me just write myself a note here. I so miss room A, and I so miss the way we used to be able to have a lot of refreshments and coax people in, and then they'd, be much more interested in doing what we proposed. But I realize that bribery is not always the best tactic, but it is sometimes worth doing. Okay, reorganization for 2022, planning for the future. Traditionally, January's when we reorganize for the next year and do a slate of officers. And I would point out that for this year, we also need to think very strongly about recruiting new members because we are down several. I've been in touch with Pam Barnes in the town administrator's office and let her know that we are looking. She said that on Friday, she'd go through the files again. The last time I checked, there weren't any applicants that were just uniquely for Energy Committee. There were 3 who mentioned Energy Committee along with all the other town committees. One of those was a summer person, and the other 2 were specialties that weren't ours and got picked up for, alternates for those committees. My impression is, and I think this started before COVID, but my impression is that, how people keep saying it's so hard to find staff. I get the idea that the town is finding it very hard to find volunteers these days. So anyway, think about, it would especially be lovely to have a mechanical engineer again, if we could snare one. And a mechanical engineer with time on her hands and, civic willingness. Yes, that would be perfection. Okay, now we've got, for those of us who want to watch the Board of Selectmen meeting, we've got 5 minutes. Do you want to do the reorganization officer stuff now, or we can postpone that till February because this has gone rather long, partly because of the unplanned for commercial.
Yes.
Then we also have members' comments and future agenda items.
I wonder why Dan Knappich kept this young lady from us all those years. Was she lurking somewhere. It's just beyond me that this thing came full blossom today at our meeting.
Yeah.
Performance contracting has been around for a long time, and it is kind of like out in the backgrounds, and they basically meet with the big municipalities and the corporations, and they've all been trying to get out there and do it, but it's not an easy task to get in and start it. And you really, we have a lot going for us here on Cape. So it's tough for them to get in here because we have Cape Light Compact. And Cape Light Compact had already done all the stuff for me. I didn't need them to do any of that stuff. Town of Falmouth was one that hooked on to this whole thing. And I thought it was Johnson Controls that was doing it. And before I even think about performance evaluation contracting, I would definitely speak to the Town of Falmouth before moving forward.
Yeah. And of course, Town of Falmouth has an energy officer, and Yarmouth, Barnstable and Bourne used to split one. So they used to have one person who would go in and get this sorted. And such a person would have kept an eye on the HVAC in the police department, for example, but they also would presumably be the ones drawing up an RFP and stuff like that if they decided they wanted outside energy services. I actually don't see how an energy services company would be that useful to Cape Towns because they get so much free from the compact. But you know, that's not for me to decide. That's for town staff to decide. And following up on what Bob said, certainly the town gets lots of these proposals from time to time. And a lot of them, you know, aren't even answered. And then they start sometimes sending to Energy Committee. So I always send them back with a thing that kind of, we don't do the hiring, we don't do the RFPing. And some of them can be kind of persistent, but even given that kind of discouraging thing. But they all seem to think that they could give a presentation at Energy Committee that would get them somewhere with the town. And I just never allowed them to.
Well,
until today.
This Echo G thing at the senior center was exactly that kind of an attempt, and then then when Rich Bienvenu, stopped it in its tracks, they backed off.
I will tell you on Cheryl. All right, she was very involved. It was Dan Knappich that tried to push this. And one of the reasons why she wasn't able to get in touch with anybody at the town. So I said to her, I said, you might want to present at an Energy Committee meeting to tell everybody what you do. And if there's projects like this that might come up, then we could recommend or not recommend or just suggest to someone. But I wasn't trying to get her to get in here. She was very heavily involved with Dan. Dan was the one that was pushing it big time.
Yeah.
She was already in there, and then Dan got up and left her
high and dry,
involved in it. And then nobody did anything. It was all supposed to be for the green community. It was supposed to be including the police. She did try to get the schools. I wasn't interested in the school part because I already had known about performance contracting and had been working with my HVAC company.
You were ahead of it, yeah.
But she was in it deep with Dan, and then kind of got left with their, hands up in the air. And then no one in town hall is aware of what it was all about, and there's no notes or anything. Amanda might have been involved with it. With Dan, I can't remember because I think it was Rich and Dan. But
Amanda's a newish employee though.
Yeah,
what, 2 years, 3 years.
She still might have been part of it.
Okay.
And she had some of it. But of course, she went out on her maternity leave and she has not been involved in a lot. And she's been trying to play catch up.
Yeah.
I think she's got her hands full.
It is past 6. Is the chair ready for a motion to adjourn?
The chair is. The chair doesn't want to miss the comedy act that begins Board of Selectmen meetings.
Okay.
Move to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Well, have a great January, everybody, and see you February 1st.
Okay, bye.
Take care.